Welcome back to my Top 10 series. This week we'll look at and discuss my favorite rides that are lost to time in Walt Disney World. There's so many rides from my youth that I could only relive through nostalgia, so to pick just 10 was a big undertaking. But let me know some of your favorites that didn't make my list. Also, we're very close to my first YouTube milestone of 50 subs. It would mean the world to me if you were here with me on that journey. But that's enough of my pandering. Let's get to the list. I've done an extensive video on Maelstrom where I compared it to Frozen Ever After, so most of my thoughts on that ride could be found there. But I will say I actually enjoyed Frozen Ever After. So that probably leads this to only being number 10 on this list. I do miss the polar bears, trolls, and other vicious animals and entities that were once featured here. And I did love the little port town at the unloading area at the end of this ride. This attraction was just so quotable and had the distinction of being Epcot's first thrill ride. The track and ride vehicles are pretty much the same, so at least we have some remnants of what was there. For a ride I never went on until my 30s, I'm a little surprised that this one made my list. For those of you who've been with me for a while know that drops aren't really my thing. But the first time I rode this attraction, I immediately questioned my entire life. This is such a great blend of dark ride immersion and thrill ride fun to make anyone in your party happy. As of this recording, Tiana's Bayou Adventure is not open yet, but I assume the track is staying the same, just with a Princess and the Frog overlay, which is why this classic is only number 9 on this list. I have mixed feelings about the ride change, but ultimately I'm excited to see what the next installment of this ride will be. I'll hold judgment until I've been on both rides. Believe it or not, Delta Dreamflight was my favorite ride in Magic Kingdom when I was little. I loved how all the scenes were so different from one another, but added something more to the story that they were trying to tell. From the cartoony paper mache beginnings of this ride, to the realistic models and animatronics from popular tourist destinations, gives off a sort of Carousel of Progress vibe. And of course, every classic dark ride isn't complete without the oversized movie screens having objects fly over your head to give off the illusion of going fast. You'll see this trick used later on in this list. It may not be the most exciting ride in the world, or even one that older parkgoers look back on fondly, but for me, this is well deserving of a spot on this list. I've had a few people in my comments section talk about the Great Movie Ride, and I think for good reason. This was by far the best ride in Hollywood studios. The queue had a mini museum filled with movie props, and had a movie theater that showed trailers from classic movies. It was a love letter to the golden age of the silver screen, and even I, who's not the biggest movie fan, couldn't wait to go on this attraction. In my opinion, this is the last great Disney World dark ride. There's a bunch of newer fun rides, but there's a certain art form to making a long, slow moving attraction keeping you engaged for 10 minutes plus. I miss the days of hopping on a bus just to ride the great movie ride, just to leave Hollywood Studios completely for a better park. This is probably one of the first rides that come to mind when I talk about Defunct Disney World attractions. This was Disney's first attempt at a pseudo choose your own adventure, as this ride had two different tracks depending on which side you were loaded into, but both ended in a very similar and dark way. Mr. Toad threw the squeaky clean image of Disney rides right out the window, and pushed the envelope of what a family friendly ride actually meant. With alcohol, semi nude paintings of women, and a meeting with a cardboard devil, it certainly felt a little out of place in Fantasyland, whose primary focus was on children. This closure sparked protest and drew a line in the sand between Toad and Winnie the Pooh fans. But we all know what really talks is green and not the skin color of Mr. Toad himself. When I ask you what the scariest Disney ride is, what comes to your mind? The Haunted Mansion? Tower of Terror? Nope. Snow White's Scary Adventure traumatized a generation. There was just something about opening day Fantasyland that Imagineers really wanted to scare the crap out of children. The ride starts off with a jump scare from the Wicked Queen, then proceeds to take you on a journey through dungeons, creepy forests, and ending with the casual dropping of a cartoon boulder on your head. I believe later on they switched the boulder out for a gem from the mine, but either way the diamond is somehow less expensive and more scary than the weekly price hikes at the parks. Perhaps no other ride is a victim of its time more than 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. To think of the undertaking it was to build a water tank that held almost 12 million gallons of water in an attempt to make a great attraction would seem very difficult, even by today's standards. Never mind the project it was back in Magic Kingdom's opening year of 1971. Missing the park's opening date of October 1st, this attraction would open 13 days after the park's debut. This ride was an amazing experience by any standard, by making a lively and realistic undersea environment. But due to low ride count and wear and tear on the submarines, this ride would ultimately meet its demise in 1994. The plot of land would lay dormant for 2 decades before the Fantasyland expansion in 2012. And still, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is leagues better than anything else built to try to replace it. This may be the most overlooked ride in classic Epcot, often outshined by the other dark rides at the time. World of Motion had a unique sense of humor and feel to it, but that wasn't by accident. World of Motion was made by legendary animator Ward Kimball. This was his first and only ride he ever worked on. He made the history of transportation seem fun and silly, mostly due to his use of sight gags and absurdist humor. I talked to a friend of mine years ago and they told me that they went to Disney when they were 5, and the only thing that they could remember was the sea serpent from this ride. I think that's the biggest compliment you could give to any attraction. That nearly 30 years later, this is the one scene that's the lasting image that someone has, from a place that is known for making memories. When building a sports team, it's important to have players to fit a certain role. You may have your stars and your local favorites, but every team has to have a heart and soul. And I feel the original Journey into Imagination was that player for Epcot. With its loss, I feel it took the wind out of a lot of fans' sails. If you go back and just do a quick YouTube search of each ride in the show building, it won't take you long to see which ones had more love and care put into it. Journey into Imagination built a cult following and made a character like Figment almost mainstream without a movie or TV show. This was done at a time when you couldn't click a button and relive your favorite Disney rides. To grow a community just by word of mouth in a 10-minute dark ride really is amazing when you stop and think about it. But there's one more ride in Epcot I feel embodies the spirit of Disney as a whole and also left at around the same time. The more I write these scripts, the more I realize it's harder to talk about attractions that I have a strong connection with, and Horizons was probably my favorite ride of all time. I often talk about attention to details and how important it is just to have things to look at in your attraction. Not just a few characters in any given scene, but stuff that you notice that are new to you every ride through. Made as a sequel to the Carousel of Progress, the original name for Horizons was supposed to be Future Probe. And I think we all can thank whatever deity we pray to that that name didn't stick. But questionable name aside, Horizons was ahead of its time, and really ahead of whatever attractions we have today. Like how I said Mr. Toad had 2 tracks, Horizons had 3 endings that were voted on towards the end of the experience. You could choose from desert, sea, or space. Each scene was handcrafted with miniatures, but the main thing Horizons is known for was its smell. In the Orange Grove scene, they piped in the scents of orange to make you feel like you're part of an environment. I hear people talking about the pain that they felt when their favorite TV show got cancelled, or when they come to an end of a series that they're currently binging. But the closure of Horizons was something that affected me on a personal level. There's always a hint of pain whenever I have to go back to watch videos on it, and with the World of Motion overlay coming to Test Track, I could only hold out hope that the original Epcot may be coming back in some capacity. But until then, Horizons remains number 1 in defunct Disney World attractions, and by a wide margin. Well, that'll do it for this list. If you're still with me at this point, thank you so very much. I hope you enjoyed this time on my channel, and if you have any suggestions that you'd like to see in the future, feel free to ask in the comments. But until next time, drop a like if you enjoyed this, subscribe if I earned it, and thank you for watching.